Y'all really thought the schedule was going to beat the best defense in the league? Not only was he sacked multiple times, turned the ball over, but at the end, he looked defeated. Like someone who just realized they lost the biggest game of their life and may never get that shot again. And in those other times where the Patriots lost this season and May would say they have to keep on improving on some things, this time he just kept praising the winner, the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks did something that nobody thought was possible before the season. January 6, 2025, the Seattle Seahawks fired their offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb after just one season. The offense ranked 21st in scoring, 28th in rushing, and the run game Mike Macdonald wanted to rely on never materialized. The direction of our offense was going different than the vision I had for our team, Macdonald said. It was a necessary decision and everyone knew it. 20 days later, they found their replacement, Clint Kubiak, the son of legendary coach Gary Kubiak, a coordinator who had just spent a season in New Orleans dealing with injuries and chaos, but still managed to keep the Saints in the top half of the league in rushing. He had worked with Cousins in Minnesota, helping him post Pro Bowl numbers. He had been the passing game coordinator in San Francisco, helping Brock Purdy lead the league in NFL passer rating. And most importantly, he knew how to build a physical offense that could dictate the terms to the defense. The coaching changes weren't enough. The roster needed an overhaul. On March 7th, the Seattle Seahawks traded Geno Smith to the Las Vegas Raiders for a third-round pick. Smith had been the starter for 3 years, made 2 Pro Bowls, but at 34 years old with a $31 million cap hit, the Seahawks were ready to move on. They needed someone younger, cheaper, and with more upside. 3 days later, they got him. Sam Darnold, 3 years, $100 million, $55 million guaranteed. The former third overall pick who had just led Minnesota to a 14-3 record. The quarterback who threw for 4,319 yards, 35 touchdowns, and just 15 interceptions. He wasn't perfect, he had struggled in the big games and in playoffs, but he was 27 years old and had familiarity with Clint Kubiak from their time together in San Francisco. And he represented a massive upgrade in potential. But Darnold needed weapons. In early March, the Seahawks had released Tyler Lockett, the veteran receiver who had been with the team for a decade. Then they traded DK Metcalf to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a second-round pick. And suddenly, Jackson Smith-Njigba was the only proven receiver left on the roster. March 12th, free agency opened, and the Seahawks went to work. They re-signed linebacker Ernest Jones to a 3-year deal, the mid-season trade acquisition who had transformed their defense. Then they brought back defensive tackle Jarran Reed on a 3-year deal as well. But the biggest move came later in March. Cooper Kupp, 3 years, $45 million, the Yakima native. The former Super Bowl MVP, the receiver who had caught 105 passes for 1,494 yards and 12 touchdowns in 2021. He was 31 years old and coming off injuries, but he was a proven number 1 receiver who could mentor Smith-Njigba and give Darnold another legitimate weapon. The Seahawks also added MVS on a 1-year deal, the big-body deep threat who spent the second half of 2024 in New Orleans with Kubiak. Then they signed defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence to a 3-year deal with $18 million guaranteed. The 4-time Pro Bowler who was 33 years old but could still rush the passer. Then came the NFL Draft in April when everything changed. The Seahawks had 10 picks, including 5 in the first 3 rounds after the Smith and Metcalf trades. With the 18th overall pick, they selected Gray Zabel, the offensive guard from North Dakota State, a mauler who could help fix the O-line. Round 2 brought safety Nick Manwari from South Carolina and tight end Elijah Arroyo from Miami. In round 3, they got QB Jalen Milroe from Alabama, the athletic dual threat who could sit behind Darnold and develop. The Seahawks had addressed their biggest needs. They had a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, new weapons, and a defense that was already elite added some extra pieces. Their preseason win total was set at 8.5, and after coming off a 10-win season, nobody thought they'd win the Super Bowl, but they had the pieces to compete in their tough division. And then week 1 happened. The San Francisco 49ers came to Seattle for the season opener. What was supposed to be a statement game for the new-look Seahawks turned into a gut-wrenching loss. Sam Darnold completed 16 of 23 passes for 150 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He got sacked once. The offense looked conservative, almost timid. Clint Kubiak's system was still being installed, and it showed. The 49ers won 17-13. Brock Purdy threw for 277 yards and 2 TDs. George Kittle caught a 5-yard touchdown pass, and the Seahawks defense didn't hold up that well, allowing 384 yards, and the offense couldn't capitalize even when they did get stopped. The Seahawks had lost at home to their division rival, and suddenly the optimism from the offseason felt premature. But Mike Macdonald wasn't panicking. "We're going to be fine," he said after the game. They just needed to execute better. And execute better in week 2, they did. Against Pittsburgh, the Seahawks went to Heinz Field and proved their coach right. 31-17, Sam Darnold was surgical, 22 of 33 for 295 yards and 2 touchdowns. He got sacked twice but kept fighting. The defense held the Steelers to just 267 yards, a much better performance. Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy dominated the line of scrimmage, and DeMarcus Lawrence had a sack. The Seahawks were 1-1 and the offense was starting to click. Week 3 brought on the New Orleans Saints, and this was the game where everything came together. 44-13, Sam Darnold completed 14 of 18 passes for 218 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was efficient, decisive, and in complete control. The defense held the Saints to just 284 yards, Ernest Jones had 6 tackles, Devin Witherspoon was all over the field, and Kenneth Walker ran for 47 yards and a touchdown. It was dominant, it was complete, and it was a glimpse of what this team could be. Week 4, the Seahawks went on to the Cardinals and escaped with a 23-20 win. The defense came up huge, they held Kyler Murray in check, they forced turnovers, and they proved they can win ugly on a short week. Week 5 was a real test against Tampa Bay though. Baker Mayfield and the Bucs came to Seattle with one of the best offenses in the league. Instead, it turned into a shootout that the Seahawks lost 38-35. Darnold threw for 341 yards and 4 touchdowns, but also an interception. He did complete 82% of his passes, but it wasn't enough. The offense was explosive, but the defense couldn't stop Tampa Bay. They gave up 426 yards, Mayfield threw for 370 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was the Seahawks' second loss of the season, and it exposed their biggest weakness. They couldn't stop elite quarterbacks. In Week 6 against Jacksonville, the Seahawks did bounce back with a 20-12 road win over the Jaguars. Darnold threw for 295 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 27 attempts. He got sacked once, the defense held Jacksonville to just 273 yards, and Trevor Lawrence struggled all game. The Seahawks were 4-2 and they were starting to find their identity, and then Monday Night Football against Houston happened. The Texans came to the Seahawks Stadium and the Seahawks won 27-19. Darnold threw for 213 yards and a touchdown. The offense wasn't explosive, but it was efficient. The defense held CJ Stroud to 254 yards and they forced 4 turnovers. It was a gritty, physical win that showed this team could win in different ways. Week 9, they dominated the Washington Commanders 38-14. Cooper Kupp had a huge game and Jackson Smith-Njigba was unstoppable. The defense held Washington to just 290 yards. It was the most complete game of the season, and it announced the league that the Seahawks were legitimate contenders. Week 10 against Arizona, a rematch, and this time it was a massacre. 44-22, Darnold threw for 178 yards and a touchdown on just 12 attempts. The defense scored 2 touchdowns. Demarcus Lawrence returned 2 fumbles for scores, becoming just the 4th player in NFL history to do so in that game. The Seahawks were 7-2 and they were rolling. Week 11 against the Rams, this was the game that tested everything. The Seahawks went to SoFi Stadium and they lost 21-19. Darnold threw for 279 yards, but also 4 interceptions. Matthew Stafford picked apart the secondary and Puka Nacua had a huge game. The Seahawks defense couldn't get any stops when it mattered, and it was a wake-up call. They weren't invincible. And suddenly, the division race was wide open again. Week 12 against Tennessee, the Seahawks bounced back with a 30-24 road win over the Titans. It wasn't pretty, but it was a win, and it kept the Seahawks in first place in the division. Week 13 against Minnesota, and this was personal. Sam Darnold facing his former team, the team that had let him walk in free agency, and he destroyed them 26-0. Darnold threw for just 128 yards, but he didn't need to do anymore. He got sacked but never panicked, and the defense held the Vikings to just 162 yards. It was one of the most dominant defensive performances of the season. Week 14 against Atlanta, another huge win, 37-9. The Seahawks were 10-3 and they had just clinched a playoff spot. Week 15, the first game against Phillip Rivers, it was a close one. 18-16, they won. Darnold threw for 271 yards but no touchdowns. He got sacked once and the offense struggled in the red zone, but the defense came up huge. Week 16 was probably the game of the year against the Rams, this time at home. And this game went to overtime, 38-37. Darnold threw 270 yards and 2 touchdowns, but also had 2 interceptions. He got sacked 4 times. Matthew Stafford threw for 457 yards and 3 TDs. It was back and forth shootout that came down to the final play, and the Seahawks finally pulled it out in OT. Week 17 against Carolina, the Seahawks went to Charlotte and won 27-10, setting the stage and keeping the Seahawks in the hunt for the number 1 seed. The Seahawks went into Levi Stadium needing a win to secure the top seed in the NFC, and they got it, 13-3. Darnold threw for 198 yards, no touchdowns but no interceptions. The offense was conservative, but the defense was dominant. They held the 49ers to just 173 yards, and Brock Purdy completed just 9 of 15 passes. The Seahawks finished 14-3, the best record in the NFC, and they secured home field advantage throughout the playoffs. A team that was supposed to compete for the division had won 14 games. A quarterback who was supposed to be a bridge had thrown for over 4,000 yards and 25 touchdowns. A defense that was already elite had finished first in points allowed, first in EPA per play, and first in DVOA. Mike McDonald was a Coach of the Year candidate. Clint Kubiak had transformed the offense, and Sam Darnold had made his second straight Pro Bowl. Jackson Smith-Njigba had 119 catches for 1,793 yards and 10 touchdowns, earning first team All-Pro honors and winning Offensive Player of the Year. Leonard Williams and Devin Witherspoon made the Pro Bowl, and the Seahawks were the best team in the NFC. They had home field advantage, they had momentum, and they were ready for the playoffs. But nobody knew what was about to happen next. A first-round bye that gave them an extra week to rest and prepare for what was about to be a historic playoff run. January 17, 2026, in the divisional round, the San Francisco 49ers came to Seattle again. The game started off with a bang. Rashid Shaheed, the speedy receiver the Seahawks had acquired in a trade mid-season, returned the opening kickoff 95 yards for a touchdown, 7-0 Seahawks before the offense even touched the ball. Sam Darnold would complete 12 of 17 passes for 124 yards and a touchdown. The defense was suffocating. The 49ers managed just 6 points. Brock Purdy completed 15 of 27 passes for 140 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. The 49ers offense, which had been one of the best in the league during the regular season, was completely shut down. Kenneth Walker ran for 116 yards and 3 touchdowns on 19 carries. It was one of the most dominant defensive performances in playoff history. But the real test was coming. The NFC Championship game, the Los Angeles Rams, Part 3. The team that had beaten them earlier in the season, the team with Matthew Stafford, who would go on to win MVP this year. The team with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. This was going to be interesting, and it was a war. Kenneth Walker scored on the 2-yard run, and Jason Myers added the extra point. The second quarter was back and forth. The Rams would kick a field goal, then Matthew Stafford found Kyron Williams for a 9-yard touchdown pass, 13-10 now Rams. But with just 20 seconds left in the half, Sam Darnold hit Jackson Smith-Njigba for a 14-yard touchdown, 17-13 at halftime. With just a few minutes left in the game, the Rams faced a critical 4th and 4 from the Seahawks 6-yard line. This was it, and this was the game. Stafford dropped back and the play broke down. DeMarcus Lawrence, a veteran pass rusher, read the play perfectly. He dropped into coverage and took away Kyron Williams, Stafford's hot route. Stafford looked for Terrence Ferguson in the back of the end zone, but Devon Witherspoon broke it up. Game over, and the Seahawks were going to the Super Bowl. Mike McDonald's defense, which had been the best in the league all season, had proven it could dominate in January. Sam Darnold, who had struggled in the playoffs with Minnesota the year before, had thrown 470 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions in 2 games. The Seahawks were going to the Super Bowl, and they were ready to face the New England Patriots, the team that had shocked the world with their own improbable playoff run. The Seattle Seahawks versus the New England Patriots, and what everyone thought would be a defensive battle turned into complete and utter demolition. Drake Maye got destroyed. He was sacked 6 times. Byron Murphy, Derek Hall, Devin Witherspoon all got in on the fun. Even 5th-round rookie Riley Mills, who had played just 4 regular season games and didn't record a single sack, got one. Mike McDonald's defense was a masterclass. They brought DB pressures that completely confused the Patriots' blocking schemes. Witherspoon blitzed off the edge and got home multiple times. The secondary smothered receivers, making Maye hold on to the ball too long. Anytime he even feigned a pulse, the Seahawks snuffed it out. The Patriots' first 9 possessions, 8 punts and a kneel down to end the half. Even when the third quarter ended, New England had just 78 yards of total offense. They had 5 first downs, the same number as Seattle had sacks. Maye finished 27 of 43 for 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, but the overwhelming majority came in garbage time. He had just 48 passing yards in the first half. The defense forced a critical fumble late in the third quarter when Derek Hall sacked Maye on 3rd and 6. Then with about 4.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Uchenna Nwosu intercepted Maye and returned it 45 yards for a touchdown. The Seahawks won 29-13, capturing their second Super Bowl title in franchise history, and they did it by making Drake Maye, the MVP runner-up, look like he didn't belong on the same field. The Seahawks season was dominant, and they capped it off by making a point that they may be the best defense we've seen in a decade. So there you have it. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you're new.